And now something completely different.
Good afternoon. I'm speaking to you live just outside
Los Angeles.
I like to think balding is just God's way of saying, now let's see you get laid.
Is it true that if you don't use it, you lose it?
What I'd really like to do is put the greatness of this man in perspective.
The hair loss community has a lot to be thankful for, having you as a spokesperson.
You mean you just call this guy up?
About life and about reality.
And now, America's #1 reality radio show for men. Live from Los Angeles, it's Spencer Kobren's The Bald Truth.
Hey guys, welcome to the show. I guess my mic is not on it. Let's see. There it is. How's everything, guys? Thanks so much for holding on and hanging out. Having some issues with the feed on the Bald Truth website, but if you are watching the show or listening to the show, that means you found us some other way. Either you are watching on Joe Tillman's YouTube page or you're listening on iTunes Radio, iHeartRadio, Guys from Queens Network, Stitcher Radio, and all of the other online resources that we broadcast this program on. Hopefully, we will be getting the link reestablished on The Bald Truth. I don't even think you can listen to audio right now on The Bald Truth. I am trying to reach out to someone to help us, but they do not seem to be there. So that is the nature of the game.
Well, that's just damned inconvenient.
It certainly is. Well, you know, it is what it is. What am I going to do?
Hey, guys.
It's not like facial paralysis or anything.
Well.
Anyway.
Yeah, it's something serious.
Yeah. So, guys, I want to welcome all of the newcomers to the program, and I would laugh at that if it wasn't so real to me. But, you know, just kidding.
Of course. Of course.
And, you know, if you're new to the broadcast, don't know who we are or who I am and why I'm here and who this other guy is. I'm a consumer advocate for men and women dealing with hair loss. I've been doing this radio broadcast or this now internet broadcast for just about 20 years, a little more than 20 years. Founder of the American Hair Loss Association, I am the author of The Bald Truth and the Truth About Women's Hair Loss. I am a guy who's been dealing with hair loss for most of his life. Started to lose my hair at the age of 21, and unfortunately, back then, there really wasn't much that I can do about it except pray. And what I did try to do is when I was doing my research, while it was a little bit more difficult, I almost fell off the chair. While it was a little more difficult to research back in the late 80s, most of the things have not really changed that much. Back in the day when I was doing my research, there was nothing that could actually stop the progression of your hair loss, regrow hair, slow things down. And frankly, there were a lot of trichologists out there and a lot of snake oil salesmen and a lot of physicians who were making all types of claims about surgical hair restoration, when in fact, back in those days, we were talking about the dark ages of hair transplant surgery. If I would have gone through with surgery, and there were many doctors, very well-known doctors, who were willing to perform surgery on me at that tender age and back in the dark ages, it would have destroyed my life. And I will never forget, and I repeat this all the time because it's important for newcomers to understand what I've been through and then, of course, what Joe has been through. But I was advised by Dr. Norman Orentreich, the father of modern-day surgical hair restoration. Essentially, he reinvented, or it was surgical hair restoration has been around since the 1930s, and actually before that. But he essentially wrote the first paper. He was able to prove donor dominance, and he was the guy that everyone from around the world was going to, besides Dr. Walter Unger. And he said to me, if you're my own son, I would say try a few hair transplants. See if you like them. If you don't like them, you don't have to come back. What he chose not to tell me about or omit was that he would have performed 4-millimeter plugs. He would have placed these plugs in my temporal region, which was barely recessed at the time. And I would have essentially made the decision to destroy my life. And he was allowing me to make that decision. In fact, he was
encouraging
it and suggesting that I make that choice. That's when I knew that there was something really fucked up with this industry. I was able to step back and I thought to myself, where is this guy going to put the hair? And am I actually a candidate for this surgery? And, judging from the results that I saw, the before and after images that I saw in his office, I was like, if they think this is good, and these are their best photos, then there's something fucking wrong here. Not so many people in that time or my age who were going through hair loss had the wherewithal or lucked out like I did. Unfortunately, Joe Tillman, who is the guy on my right or on my left, depending on, I guess if you're viewing it, it's on my left, on your left. Yeah. He wasn't so lucky. And he unfortunately went down the wrong path, like so many other guys in our age group did. And actually, guys are doing the same thing today.
In droves, actually, more so now than when we were doing our research.
Yes. Because right now, surgical hair restoration is more commoditized than it's ever been. And we are in a situation where consumers believe that it is a simple, outpatient, one-size-fits-all procedure. Many doctors who are being sold turnkey devices believe that as well, and that's the way it's being marketed. I was on the phone yesterday with a physician in the, I'm not going to say where, but in the Midwest, who, and I must get a call like this almost every week now because I seem to be telling the same story over and over again. This guy is freaked out because he is losing cases to complete novices, mostly neografters, and he doesn't know how to handle it. He doesn't know how to differentiate himself. He doesn't, he basically told me that he was fed up with the industry. His exact words were, even the well-known guys are whoring themselves out. I don't know how you feel about that, Joe, but there are some guys out there who've been established for a long time who are now essentially whoring themselves out.
Yeah, they're trying to adapt, and we've talked about this before. They're trying to adapt by unwittingly evening out the playing field. They don't recognize the fact that they're lowering themselves down into the depths of where these very average to below average clinics are operating in order to compete. And they don't understand the value of differentiating themselves based on their merits, based on their validations, based on their memberships of organizations like the IAHRS that actually matter. Yeah. And if they can, it's not rocket science, but unfortunately, in many of these situations for these clinics, it is rocket science, and but it's a very simple formula. They just have to execute it and take advantage of what they have at their disposal, and they're not doing it, and they're suffering the consequences because of it.
Well, that's well said, and that's the sad truth. And when I try to explain this to these guys, and I tell them, the leverage that they have, and essentially they have to leverage trust, because what they offer is so much greater than, how much the procedure costs. A lot of these guys are complaining that, they're just picking up the phones and they're answering questions about price. And they are now trying to battle it out with these guys who don't know what the fuck they're doing, these traveling techs, and just based on price. These are some of the best hair transplant surgeons in the world. And now they are out there trying to compete and jockey for position on Real Self, which is fine. But they don't realize that they're diminishing their own superiority, for lack of a better term. But it's the truth.
Well, what's interesting, I think that, and this is a free tip for any clinic that wants to have a leg up, is use some common sense with the question about price. I mean, I used to use this before when I was a consultant, and depending on, who I was talking to, they'd say, well, how much is, how much per graft, or how much is it going to cost? And my response would be, well, is this before or after we repair you from the cheaper guys? Something like that. And It always makes them stop in their tracks, and then they're no longer asking about price. I just fucked them up, and they're like, "Wait a minute, what do you mean repair work? What are you talking about?" And it opens up a whole new line of discussion that leads to education. And unfortunately, these places don't understand how to do that. And that's, again, part of the differentiation process.
Well, what frightens me is that some of these guys have been in the industry for 20, 25 years. Mm-hmm. And they hire these marketing people, these so-called marketing experts, these SEO experts, bring them on in hopes to gain some visibility, to jockey for position, to get some leverage. And these so-called experts know nothing about the field. They don't understand. I just took the camera off myself. They don't understand how the consumer gets their information. They don't understand how the flow of information is dictated in the online world. Right. And they don't understand how to present themselves in a favorable light without, like you said, basically going into the mud with these inexperienced, unethical, these guys are like fucking gangsters now, man.
It's getting that way. Look, I'm seeing some clinics resorting to they're so desperate. I can only imagine that it's out of desperation that they're actually going online and attacking other clinics, inserting in online environments. Like there's one forum where I saw one clinic was injecting their results of repair patients and saying, "You'll never guess whose repair work this is or who screwed this guy up," and actually had an image of some different clinics to let your mind wander, and then to say, "This is the kind of work that we repair." This is inserting into other clinic presentations.
Yeah, it's actually a shame. It's unethical. It's an embarrassment. And look, there's a lot that's going to change this year. I can't be specific, but I have been trying to figure out ways to work with the ISHRS and the ABHRS, and they have reached out to me, to discuss the problems that are arising in the industry. The fact that there's so many guys who are going abroad to get really fucked up hair transplants. The fact that there are people out there who are not experts in the field, who really have never performed surgery, who are hanging up a shingle and making it appear as though they are either pioneers or true experts, or they're providing state-of-the-art services to consumers when they are not. Both the ISHRS and the ABHRS do not know what to do. And frankly, they are continuing to handcuff themselves and to get in their own way and to essentially make themselves less relevant and more impotent than ever. And as I speak to them with every meeting and every conference call and every online exchange with some of their so-called leadership, I realize it's never going to fucking happen. And we have to go out there and make it happen ourselves. Yeah. And frankly, that's what we're doing. I'm working on something right now, which I think is going to be extremely powerful and beyond relevant. And we're going to be able to get this information out to the public in a much bigger way. Those who are attached to the IHRS and those who are attached to the American Hair Loss Association obviously will benefit, but it's going to be part of their duty as members of what we're doing to really work to promote this message that we're getting out there. And there's a blueprint being set up, and my hope is that most of the guys, so far most of the guys seem to understand, but those who don't, I'm going to have to drop. Yeah. And just bring on new guys. And that's what I've decided. And look, it is what it is. And now that I got some numbness in my head, I'm like, I got to do this fast because who the fuck knows what's going to happen.
Numbness in your head still.
888, yeah. I'm okay. I have to go to the dentist again tomorrow. 888-659-3727. We're going to take some phone calls. I'm trying to look at the area codes here, but the calls came in a weird order. Let me see if this is. Let's see who this is. Hey, you're on the air. Who's this and where are you calling from?
Hey, Spencer, this is Dr. Alexander calling.
Dr. Scott Alexander, how are you,
Dr. Alexander.
Joe, how are you?
I'm fine, sir. How about yourself?
Doing good.
I don't know if you are trying to watch On the Ball Truth, but we're having trouble with the player, so you're probably seeing an old show. But we are obviously on the air, so I'm glad you called in. You heard my opening.
I haven't talked to you for a while. Uh-huh. Hey, so do you want to hear a story that I've never told you before?
Yes, I do. As long as it doesn't hurt my feelings.
No. I mean,
it's an exclusive, everyone.
I mean, years ago, I had just finished residency, and my uncle was a plastic surgeon. So I was working with him for a short while, kind of picking up pointers and things like that. One day, he has this guy that came into his office, and he was begging for a hair transplant. My uncle goes and says, I hate doing this, but he wants it really bad. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to do 3 or 4 of these, and then you do the rest, because I don't like to do them. And so he pulls out his little hand drill out the 4-millimeter plugs, and did a couple, showed me how to do it, and said, here, take over and do them. And after that experience, I said, I'm never, ever going to get into hair transplants. This is the worst.
And what year was this?
86.
Okay. And that, it's funny because...
Later,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, like 20 years later is when they started to improve, and that's when I started doing them.
Yeah, I mean, we were seeing some obviously some great improvements around, as far as mainstream improvements, around 96, 97, 98. There were guys like, Bobby Limmer, Bob Bernstein, Bill Rassman, who were really promoting follicular unit transplantation with the use of stereomicroscopic dissection.
Seeger?
Yeah, go ahead.
A guy in Canada, Seeger.
The late great Dr. Seeger.
Oh, Seeger, yeah.
Yeah, who was
he was doing pretty good.
One of the original members of the IHRS. As a matter of fact, what's interesting is that when Dr. Seeger applied to the IHRS, we usually ask for one physician as a reference, and who he's performed surgery on, and that physician was Dr. Alan Feller. So Dr. Feller, I had called to, when Dr. Seeger applied, and that's how I got to meet Alan Feller. At the time, Dr. Feller said that microscopes are bullshit. And then within about 6 weeks, he said he was converting to microscopic dissection.
Like, oops.
Yeah.
never mind.
Yeah. Yeah. But, listen, that was a long time ago. And, obviously Dr. Feller has, done some incredible work in the field. And you trained with Dr. Feller, right?
I did for a short while, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, what do you think about my opening? What do you think about the reality of what's happening in the field today?
Unfortunately, it's true. It's crazy out there because I don't know if it's cheaper, more competition, but a lot of the hair transplant guys who have been in the industry for a while, it seems like they want to do more cases, be less involved, and do it cheaper to compete.
Well, yeah.
And it's just, so the quality is going down a lot.
Well, and that's what that's what the general population, the general public doesn't realize. They think that the quality is going up. They think that with these new devices and the way that hair transplantation is being marketed today, that it is a safer, better, more aesthetically pleasing procedure than ever before.
It's a day spa visit.
Exactly. When in fact it is less safe, in my view, in general. There are more people who are unfortunately dealing with even minor, and never minor, but a lidocaine toxicity, all types of issues, more necrosis that I'm seeing more than ever before. I'm seeing many more multi-graft multi-hair grafts placed in the hairline than I have in more than a decade.
Yeah.
And some of this stuff is coming out of the offices of some pretty well-known clinics who are really good at strip, who decide to hand over the reins to technicians, which, again, I always say this, there's some really great technicians out there. But in general, patients aren't aware that technicians are going to be performing such a
major role
in the entire surgery. And
I find it
making a lot of decisions as well.
I find it amazing, and Dr. Alexander, you can give me your thoughts on this, but I find it amazing that when I made a video about hairlines and I talk about the ancient technology known as stereoscopic dissecting microscopes, people, metaphorically look at me like I'm speaking an alien language. And it's ironically, it's the old ways of dealing with grafts that are best for the most modern procedure, quotes, modern procedure possible for FUE. You got to incorporate a little bit of the FUT skills with the microscopes to be able to really make sure those hairlines are as natural as possible. And I was talking about this. It's almost like it's a dying art to be able to really refine those grafts.
And, it's really interesting because I have people coming into my office. I use for FUEs the robot, the artist robot.
Yeah.
And a lot of people will come in just thinking, well, you use a robot, so the robot's pretty much handling the whole thing. And it's going to do your procedure for you. So it's going to be unbelievable because it's a robotic machine run by a computer. And I tell them the only thing the robot is doing is obtaining the hair I'm going to use to do your transplant. Everything else we do just like we do strip. We hand extract the grafts. We place them, immediately go from where the robot is to the microscope, look at them under the microscope, make sure it's a good quality graft, trim it down if it needs to be trimmed, make sure whatever it's a 1, 2, 3 hair follicle, and categorize it. And then it goes on cold saline. And most of these places that are doing FUEs, whatever machine they're using is drilling out the graft, and it goes from there right into the head.
Oh, yeah.
Whatever it is. And the quality is really poor. Well, and the other thing is, I think that it's been like this for a long time, is most of the guys that are doing FUEs, I mean, it's a hot thing right now, but most of them who are doing FUEs, the doctors don't really like doing it. So they're turning it all over to the technicians. And they don't really know what's going on. They don't know what the technicians are doing. And all they know is, hey, we filled in the holes and this procedure's done. And until that starts to grow in, you just don't have a clue of what you got.
Well, we've had, I have an undercover tech that has been speaking with us, and I've been doing these undercover tech and also undercover doc segments. And there's a lot of stuff that I'm sure you probably agree with, sadly, that's happening. A lot of guys are, they're paying for attempts for all these machines now. So they're essentially paying for attempts. They're paying the company. They're partnering with these companies. So every time they utilize whatever the device is, whether it's a robot or the neograft, they have to. The doctor has to pay the company approximately $1 per graft or $1 per attempt. And what happens is all the physician sees is the money that's going out. And in order for techs to remain relevant, to keep their jobs, to be called upon again, they have to, at the very least, make themselves look good in front of these doctors. So what's happening? They may have 2,400 attempts with, say, the robot, for instance, and they're only getting, 1,900 good grafts. And what happens to the rest of those grafts? Well, they're either placing them, even if they are completely denuded or they are transected.
Transected,
or they are splitting other grafts. and then just replacing those and putting them into recipient sites so that they can fill those holes.
Right.
And that is happening every single day. Patients have no idea that their precious donor is being wasted. And this isn't something that's atypical. This is something that's happening across the board, mostly with these turnkey devices.
Yeah, you know what? And I see it all the time, and because I have to compete against these other people. So they're coming into my office, and they're saying, look, these guys said they'll do it for this amount. They said it's going to be this and this and this. And it's like, they're asking me, like, why am I so expensive? Why do I only do one in a day? And I have to go and explain all these things to them.
But you don't.
But
all you have,
competition.
But all you have to do is for your local competition is say, hey, look, this is why I spend all the time. I'm doing the work myself, and make sure that whoever you're considering is an accepted member of the IHRS and recommended by the American Hair Loss Association, because your competition is not displaying those seals. They're not accepted members of what we do, especially your local competition. So you would have no competition, Scott. That's the thing, and that's what you guys need to really leverage.
The problem with this, I know, but you would be amazed at how many people come to your office and still are seeking the lowest price, and they are not. They just believe that a hair transplant is a hair transplant, and they're buying a commodity. And you're more money, the other guys are less money. So I don't believe what you said, and I'm going to them. And you try to direct them. Look, you got to get into the forums. You got to go on the internet and do research. Find out what's really going on out there. And some of these guys, they're just not that interested until they get their transplant. And now all of a sudden they're doing the research.
Yeah, but here's the problem. Even on the forums, and the forums are just a dirty place. They're getting worse and worse. We try to control what's happening on Bald Truth Talk, and it's not easy. And because we moderate the forum, we get a lot of shit. But what's happening on all the forums now is essentially the forums are not going to survive unless they start to allow physicians who are really potentially, maybe doing some of the things that the ISHRS is strongly against, some of the things that we're talking about right now, guys who are competing purely on price, guys who may not be true experts in the field, but, they're being kind of brought onto these different forums. So it's becoming a much more of a difficult place, I think, for consumers to do their due diligence. And that's why trying to educate people within your practice is going to be very powerful. And, my hope is that this year, as we create some more resources and have our membership really start to, tweet and share and, do a lot of stuff that, get a lot of the correct information out through social media, I think we're going to be able to create a much better environment and a safer environment for both physicians who are doing good work to be involved in, and also for consumers. And I know you and I have spoken about that in the past, and I think that we're going to be able to really make that happen. I just think that people have to stop, the doctors have to stop panicking and stop trying to compete, in a sense, with these guys who don't know what they're doing. And what I mean by that is they are trying to compete on the same playing field. They're trying to market themselves in the same way in which these complete novices are. And Joe, I know you have a lot to say about that.
Well, yeah, and I'd just like to say that, when you're looking at the kind of marketing that these competitors are putting out there, and they're trying to undercut you on price, you try to market in that same way, that same manner, you have a lot more to lose than they do, because a lot of times these places are either fly by night, or their existing practices of plastics where they're just adding this in as an adjunct that they might do, a couple times a week. And you need to, a part of the differentiation, Dr. Alexander, is, really specifying that this is what you do day in and day out. You don't do boob jobs. You don't do lipo. This is what you're dedicated to. And, one of the things that I used to put out there is ask the person that's coming in, well, is this other clinic an IAHRS accepted member? And that's just step one. But then, and I don't know if you caught this earlier before you called in, but one of the things I used to say when someone would say, start talking about price, how much do you cost? I would come back and say, well, it depends on if I'm doing the repair work of another clinic or if it's the first time. And they would always stop in their tracks and say, what do you mean? And that opens up the line for proper education where you can say, well, if I'm repairing your procedure, it means you've already paid for a bad procedure once, and then you're coming to me to fix it. And of course, obviously with your excellent before and after photos, you can use that to educate them about proper naturalness. Hell, use the video that's on my YouTube channel where I'm talking about these pluggy hairlines.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing that's really great out there is patient testimonials. I mean, that's one of my biggest calling cards is all my former patients are willing to get out there and rant and rave about how happy they are with the results they got. But, yeah, I mean, as well as I do that transplants, there is still a wide range of quality. And it is probably one of the most difficult procedures to do out there and do it well. Because
consistently.
Hairlines are so telling. I mean, the worst thing to ever have is a transplant that someone is going to, or someone who is looking at you is going to look at. And they're not looking at your face, but they're looking at your hair transplant.
But what's funny is that's the new normal. If you go on the YouTube channels, that's the new normal. That's what these guys who are really pimping out hair transplants online and who are developing pretty, significant followings. If you look at their work, and listen, it's not their fault, and they may be happy with it. And, some work is better than others, but on average, the work that we're seeing that is kind of face forward on the social media in the social media world is not good. I mean, if we would have seen this 10 years ago, people would have been freaking out.
Yeah, I was saying before that the baseline of naturalness, what's considered to be acceptable work, has dropped dramatically. I mean, the standards that we're seeing now, or the average work that we're seeing now across the board, is reminiscent of mini micrografting in 1993 or 1994.
Crazy.
The refinement. You remember this, Dr. Alexander? 10, 12 years ago on the forums and all over the web, there were these battles where patients were arguing about the most minute details of hairline work and the most minute details of how to, the differences in graft work from one clinic to the next. Now, on YouTube and all these social media platforms, what they're concerned about is the shape of their hairline and how dense everything looks. And so they're going to these clinics. Sometimes it's, these mill clinics in Turkey. Sometimes it's mill clinics in North America, or clinics where, they've got a rotating roster of technicians coming in and out doing the work, where they're grabbing the biggest grafts possible and they're stuffing them in, hoping that a lot of it will grow. So you got, it's just really, it's disastrous is what it is, because some of these guys, even after one surgery, couldn't possibly be repaired because their donors are depleted and they got pluggy hairlines. Yeah. It's a huge mess. That's something that we've never seen before.
Now, let me ask, and I don't know how comfortable you are talking about this, and if you're uncomfortable speaking about this, let me know. But what do you think about the ISHRS's position on everything? And, it's one thing to take a position, and it's another thing to take a position and then essentially, in my view, be completely complicit in a lot of the, let's say, wrongdoing that's happening in the industry.
Well, I mean,
it's pretty hypocritical in my view.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I've really, it drives me nuts ever since I've been in the industry.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the guys with power are the guys that aren't doing the best work. And so when all the time we get guys at our meetings are standing up and ranting and raving about how you got to do it this way and you can't do this and you have to have ethics and everything. But yet we know that in their own clinic, they aren't practicing anything that they're talking about. Sometimes they're the worst with unethical things that they're doing. The quality isn't anywhere close to what they're saying. It's because all they're interested in is making a quick buck.
Well, I'd say that, and also
a name for themselves.
And but they just don't have they don't have the skill set. That's what it comes down to.
That's a lot of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot of it. But what's driven me crazy is that you get a lot of these guys come into the industry thinking that, and it's because they've talked to other people in the past and things like that, but they get in because they think it's a way they can make a quick buck and not take that much time to do it. Meaning their part of the procedure is about an hour, and they're out of there doing another one, and the techs are doing the rest of it. And so they don't come in with the idea, I'm going to work hard, I'm going to make sure everything is really refined, everything looks extremely natural and normal, and spend whatever time it takes to do that. They come in with the attitude, I'm going to spend the least amount of time I can and get it over to the techs as fast as I can.
Well, look, I was asked to speak at a pretty big cosmetic surgery / plastic surgery conference here in Beverly Hills. It was held at the Four Seasons. Craig Ziering was on the panel, so was Mark Dower, and there was a dermatologist, I think from Texas, if I'm not mistaken, discussing her PRP. And I have to tell you that, you know, I've been to these conferences before, and I've spoken at one or two. This was some of the biggest bunch of bullshit and pandering that I've ever seen. And I'm sitting on this panel, and I'm just looking at this saying, how the fuck does this go on? So, of course, I go up there, and I'm essentially telling the truth, not essentially, but I'm telling the hard truth about the field. And what they wanted me to do is give a talk on how to grow a successful hair transplant practice. And my talk was more about, you know, what pitfalls to avoid if you want to be successful in hair transplant surgery and actually help your patients. And I had a slide with my undercover tech talking about how the industry and how these turnkey devices are not only conning, and these are her words, conning the patient, but they're also conning the physicians who are purchasing these devices, because they're being told that it is one size fits all, that it's a very easy procedure, that they don't have to do anything except to buy this apparatus or this machine or this robot, and we do the rest. We'll have techs come in, or we'll train you and we'll market for you and all this shit. Well, let me tell you, have you ever looked at one of these device makers' Alexa rankings? They're not getting any fucking traffic. No matter how much money they're spending, no one's going to their website. So if you think that spending all this money and, you know, part of you spending this money is getting the marketing, you're wrong. And, you know, you decided to purchase the robot because in your hands, you believe that it was something that could really benefit patients. But I will tell you this, and to give full disclosure, I always say this, I did consult for restoration robotics for 2 years, and I did so on a relatively limited basis. It was my goal to help them make the machine dummy-proof. It hasn't gotten to that point yet, and we decided not to work together. But my message has always been clear, and it's been the device could, it's really improved and it could be really good in the right hands, but it's completely user dependent. And unless the clinic knows what they're doing, it's just like any other tool.
All right.
I mean, what are your thoughts?
Well, and the other problem with this is that the doctors that are purchasing these things really believe that the techs know how to do an excellent job, because they don't have any idea of what goes on, what it takes to make a good quality hair transplant, and they could stand there and watch what they do all day long and they wouldn't have a clue.
Yeah,
So,
well, it might as well be.
that-
It's like witchcraft. It's like these tiny little hairs that are able to be transplanted. I mean, these guys are used to doing something else, so I can imagine that they would be looking at this just in awe.
Crazy. So what they do is they stick their head in, say hi to the patient, how are you doing, and then that's the last you see of him because he's off doing something else. Meanwhile, you and I know of the quality of the text out there is really varied. And to get a really high-quality text that really believes in their work is hard to do. And you got to go through a lot of text to find someone that's really, really good.
Yeah, and I will say they do exist, but in my experience, it's really only a handful.
I mean, it takes me a long time to be able to get a new tech or someone that I think can do quality work. It is,
and that's the thing is I would imagine these travel techs. Once a doctor that knows what he's doing finds a really good travel tech, they make it worth their while to stop traveling, to settle down.
They're not traveling that much
and
anymore.
stick with their clinic. No, don't travel anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. And what I love is when I have a tech that I don't think is good enough quality, so I get rid of them. And then I hear that they're in another state running the guy's practice. It's like, are you kidding me?
Oh, yeah.
I wouldn't let them touch anything in my practice, and now they're running his.
Well, here's the thing, though. I mean, a lot of these guys, and that's what it is. They're set up with these people who, they understand maybe the business of hair transplantation. They've been around it for a long time. When a physician who gets into the field, who's new to the field, has absolutely no clue in what's happening, and they make this huge investment, whether it's $80,000, $100,000, $250,000. They believe that the person that may have been in the field for 5-7 years is an expert, when in fact they may have been doing things one way, which could be the wrong way for those many years.
Yeah.
And they all of a sudden put them in charge of their techs. They put them in charge of the surgery. And like this undercover tech said on the air, I think it's up online right now. Essentially, for the most part, at least her team, when her team goes into a clinic, the surgeon really has little to say.
Yeah.
That's it. They go in, they control the entire day.
Unfortunately, people think because a machine is being used to do this, that everything is going to be the same. And both you, Spencer, and Joe, know there are so many pitfalls along the way from beginning to end that can just destroy your case, that if you aren't being careful with every step, I mean, it goes from when the machine's doing its part to when the techs are handling the grafts to when they're trimming them to when they're placing them. I mean, every little step along the way, if they screw up, those grafts are either going to grow funny or they're going to die.
Yeah.
And guys, hold on. We will take your calls in a second. We just wanted to give Dr. Alexander a little time to talk because, listen, you're hearing from somebody who's really one of the best hair transplant surgeons in the country, if not the world. He's been with the IHRS for many years, and he's a guy that really, I mean, he's doing the work himself. And Dr. Alexander, you decided to get the Artist robot, but you also understood what the limitations were. You know how to work within those limitations, and because you understand every nuance of the surgery. And the fact that you have the infrastructure to perform strip surgery, you are looking at those grafts that are extracted under magnification, under a microscope. You're refining grafts.
I'm standing there with the controls in my hand of the robot, making minor adjustments throughout the entire case.
Right.
Yeah.
And then we take those grafts immediately into the microscopes and go over them and do every little step, just like would be involved in a strip surgery. And so the ultimate quality of your grafts has to be good, or else, I mean, I have people coming to me expecting such phenomenal work that if I don't produce it, I'm in trouble.
Right.
And
you certainly paint yourself into a corner when you're doing good work because the bar is set higher and you got to meet that bar every day.
Well, and they're looking at phenomenal pictures and they say, if mine doesn't look like this, I'm going to be upset. And it's like, whoa, well, you know. So, I have to make sure everything turns out well.
Now, Dr. Alexander, you know, we have some phone calls. I don't know if they want to ask you questions or if they want to ask us questions, but you know what? I'm going to keep you on, and if you have some time, maybe you could answer some questions with us.
Okay.
All right, so let's see if I can make this happen. All right, you are there. Hey, you're on the air. Who's this and where are you calling from? Hello? Oh, man, caller's hung up. All right, Dr. Alexander, you there? Okay, let's see.
Yeah.
I think someone, let's try this line. Hold on. Hey, you're on the air. Who's this and where are you calling from?
Chris. Chris John, I'm calling from Houston, Texas.
Hey, Chris from Houston. How are you?
Hey, Chris.
I'm doing well. I want to give a shout out to Rob because he's the one that told me about you guys' show, and I've been watching it offline and then, of course, online.
Awesome. Welcome, man.
It's very important. Cool. Hey, so, man, I'm starting to deal with some hair loss. It's mainly in the front of my hairline, and my wife found some group on Instagram, and last week I was out in Beverly Hills, and I went to a place called Epion, and very quickly I felt like these guys don't have a real solution for me. But while I was there was a girl who was looking at videos on YouTube, and I was like, maybe I should go on YouTube as well, and that was how I actually came across your group, and then I saw Rob's comments. But so in any case, since that time, he and I had a short conversation. But he really suggested I give you guys a call because you're the expert. So my situation is that my hair is thinning around my temples and around the front of my hairline, and I was looking at this FUE process. But the thing is, I'm African American. My hair is curly, so now I've come to understand that. And not only is it curly on the outside, it's also curly on the inside. And I was looking at, guys had a bunch of different comments. So in any case, I went to Bosley today. I met with a doctor named, what's his name? Carrie Feldman.
Okay.
And he told me that well, first of all, I should mention that I've not taken any Rogaine or any other drugs. So, I was kind of just going to jump right into this hair restoration, thinking that would solve the issue.
Well, I'm glad you found this, man, because you probably would have been fucked.
Really?
That's all I'm saying.
It's funny because so he was. I want to know. He told me that I probably needed about 800 hairs. I don't know if that's the right terminology. And then he also mentioned that normally hair is spaced 1 millimeter apart, but now he said he'll do it 3 millimeters apart. He said that I probably need to use some Rogaine after to maintain the hair. But one of the things I felt confident speaking to him, maybe wrongly so, but it was because he said that he had dealt with my hair type before, and he said that he would be the person doing the procedure, extracting the hair using this FUE gun and implanting the hair. And maybe I'm naive. What else should I be concerned about? That's kind of in a nutshell. Yeah.
Let's see.
Doc, you want to take this?
What do you think, Dr. Alexander?
Okay, so number one, they aren't going to do a density that's going to make you happy. You got to put the grafts a lot closer together. You have to put the grafts or the hair follicles much closer together than what they're talking about.
Okay.
So you want something that's going to be at least thick enough to blend in with your existing hair, because you're the hardest case out there to do. Number one, you got this full head of hair with these recessions going on.
By the way, Doc, I don't know if you're on speaker or if it's your cell, but you sound a little bit like you're in a tunnel.
Okay, sorry, it's myself.
Okay.
But anyway, you have to make this transplant blend into your existing hair to look good and to blend so that it doesn't look like you've been transplanted. And you have to have like the finest quality transplant done right at the front hairline and into those temporals, or else you are going to look terrible. And that's what essentially, Joe, you've seen it a million times. You've seen these things after they're done, and they come in, they're scarred up now. They have hair that's not very dense, and it's all these sparse hairs next to normal hairline.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if the caller, what's your name again?
My name's Chris.
Chris, I don't know if you got the information correct, because it sounds very odd that they would say they're going to be placing the grafts 3 millimeters apart. Maybe he meant that he's going to be extracting grafts 3 millimeters apart from the donor area.
Well, who knows? He could have meant that he was going to place them 3 millimeters apart. You know,
he could have, because if he said that would be pretty bizarre. But I guess it's possible.
I mean, yeah. What happens on these things is that this is something that's been going on for 20 years, saying that a high density transplant can't be done because the grafts won't grow, and a lot of these national chains are still using that line. And it's totally false. You just have to do a very refined hole or site to put the hair in. And
well, hey, Chris, I don't mean to cut you off, Doc. But Chris, let me ask you a question. First of all,
sure.
how far has your hair loss progressed to this point, or are you just starting to lose hair now?
I just kind of, it's funny because he gave me this hair loss classification. And I actually thought that I was a 1 on it, but I think he has me more as being a 2. Well, I think he has me between like a 2A.
Well, here's the thing: if you think you're a 1, that means if you think you're a 1, that means visibly you still have a very strong hairline. When the classification may be based on what they're seeing as far as your miniaturization. So you may look like you have a lower hairline, but it's actually they're noticing, they see the thinness and they see the actual pattern that's emerging. So maybe the pattern that's emerging is a 2A. But with that said,
I think that's the situation.
It doesn't even sound to me like you were even close to being a candidate for hair transplant surgery. And frankly, what you would probably want to do is, did they speak to you about medical management before the process, before having surgery?
Well, that was one of the things that they asked in their questionnaire. And, it's funny because I wish I could upload pictures to your to this site because I have no problem doing it. But I know when I spoke with Rob, he was asking me about that. But, I heard so many different stories. I had a work colleague of mine that was taking, Propecia or the Finet. He was telling me he was having erectile dysfunction. So, and then, I was open to going out and getting some Rogaine, but then at least that doctor today told me that Rogaine is not going to regrow my hair. It'll just help maintain it. That's where it's currently at.
Well, here's the thing.
Yeah, you know what? Here's the other thing. I tell you, I really do not think the medical treatments help in the temporals or the front hairline. So it's going to hurt. It's going to help more behind those areas, but right at the temporals and right at the front hairline, I don't think it works.
Well, what I do know, based on, and again, I'm not a physician, but what I know, at least from my experience and also anecdotally, is at the very least, there is evidence, anecdotal evidence, that it does slow the progression of in some cases, of receding hairline. So, what does that mean? That means that it can help. As far as you not getting that much worse. And if you decide to have a hair transplant, frankly, you want to keep as much of your native hair as possible. So, and this is not to contradict what Dr. Alexander said, because clinically, it doesn't show that finasteride actually does help in the mid-anterior scalp that much, or in the hairline. But anecdotally, we've seen, at least I've seen, a lot of positive results. Joe, what do you think?
Yeah. So what's the solution for the person that's dealing with the hairline? Then, if you both believe that the meds don't necessarily help for temporal areas in the hairline, then
let me ask you: if you were able to keep the hair that you have right now, would you be happy?
That's the question.
Yeah, I I've been using these fibers. It's just like last year I had LASIK eye surgery, right? And I've never wore glasses before. And now that I can see better, I'm still like, I remember what it was like when I was 25 or when I was 35, and I didn't need contacts and I didn't need the stupid surgery. And even though I have this surgery and I can see, it's not like it was when I was even 35. So that was another issue because I'm 44 now.
Okay, so Chris,
and I started experiencing.
That's what I was wondering. If you're 44 years old and only losing slightly in the front hairline and in the temporals, I transplant those guys all the time. But then I will try to get them to go on Propecia.
Wait. I'm sorry. Repeat what you said, please.
I transplant patients like you all the time because I can match the front hairline really well. I go in and around the existing hair. So if you have hair there right on the front hairline and it's a little, you've lost some, it's gone back maybe a half a centimeter or a centimeter, and it's thin right there, yes. I can go in and around those and match it and fill it in to where it doesn't look like you've lost anything. But it's just all how you do it. You got to take your time. You got to match what you think was the original hairline. And, I mean, it's a slow process, but you have to make sure every graft is perfect. The good thing with you is your hair is curly, so hair angles aren't as telling as straight hair. But
that was what you said today.
Yeah, so what you have to do, you need to get on you got to look at a lot of before and after pictures and really be critical. I mean, Joe's seen a million of them. You got to know who's the guys that can do the best quality work because that's the hardest area to do it.
And I was going to say, let me just pop in here. I think, Spencer asked you the most important question of the evening, and that is, if you didn't have the option of hair transplants right now, would you be okay with what you have? And your answer tells you everything else you need to know. You said, yes, I can handle this. Then do so. Okay? Hair transplantation, there is no guarantee. Just like with your LASIK analogy was the perfect analogy. Because I had PRK, not LASIK, but I had PRK myself. I can relate to that, where you said that it's better, but it's not like it was. And getting a hair transplant will certainly make it better if everything across the board works perfectly, but it's not going to be like it was. Okay. In some cases it can be, but you can't count on that. Okay. And a couple things I wanted to ask you, during any of your consultations with anyone, has anyone talked to you about the potential downsides? Have they talked to you about the scarring? Have they mentioned that African Americans on average will have worse scarring than non-African Americans?
No, they downplayed that. They made that sound like I was actually in a better situation because my skin was dark. I got a completely different. I mean, they really minimized that.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, there is something to be said about.
Is that correct?
There is something to be said about. There is something to be said about the less contrast between your hair and skin. That does make a difference, and also the fact that your hair is curlier. And like Dr. Alexander stated, the angles are less critical, even though they still are critical. But if someone screws you up a little bit with the angles, it's going to be less visible than if you had straight hair. So they weren't being disingenuous when they made that comment about the hair contrast. However, your hair quality, the fact that your hair will most likely curl or splay under the skin, makes excision and extraction more difficult. There has to be a higher level of skill, a better skill set in order to do that and not transect your hairs. Also, usually, and I don't know if Dr. Alexander could help me with this, but usually a lot of docs will pick a larger punch for Afrocentric hair. So you're going to have the possibility of greater scarring. And with African Americans or Asians, there's a greater chance of keloid scarring as well.
Keloids, yep.
Yeah, I don't have
and that's the
keloid
biggest
skin,
problem. Yeah, because you can't guarantee it, but there is a chance of a little bit bumpier scar in the back of your head. All those little, because it's FUE you're talking about, it'll just be a dot, but those dots could be raised.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the point of this, Chris, is that the result can be extremely rewarding, but there are potential downsides that you got to be aware of. Hair transplant surgery isn't always, butterflies and rose petals. It can be a very stressful experience. I've been through 9 of them myself, 2 of which were horrible. The other 7 were pretty easy to deal with, but still, I mean, a lot of people just aren't equipped to go through something like this.
Can I ask, why did you have to go through so many surgeries?
I ask myself that every day.
I've seen you. Oh, okay.
No.
Well, dude, this guy was like a Norwood 20. I mean, this guy was so
really,
bald.
Really bald.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and honestly, the last few surgeries I had were only because I worked at a clinic where I only had to walk 20 feet, and I could lay down and have a world-class surgeon just add more hair for me. If I didn't work for a great clinic at the time, I wouldn't have had so much surgery as much surgery as I've had. I would have been fine with 2, maybe even 1. I was happy after 1 simply because I didn't look like a circus freak anymore. And because I was a repair patient. The second one onward by the way. Was just icing on the cake.
Joe.
Yes.
Tell this guy that, I mean, and it was an interesting question. His question was, why do you have to have so many? You have to understand that most patients, once you're cut, you're cut, no matter what type of surgery you have. The likelihood of you having to have a second surgery is pretty high once you go under the knife the first time.
Yeah.
And that's something you have to be prepared for. Now, if you're able to slow the progression of your hair loss, if you don't have any shock loss, if everything is aligned and you go to the right clinic that is on that day and you have the right physiology, then you may not need another transplant for many years. But there will probably come a time when things start to progress again, and you're probably going to need at least a second surgery.
So how does hair transplant surgery sound?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. If you're going to have surgery, you need to understand all of the entire scope and possible pitfalls of having surgery. If you go in with all the knowledge that you need, then you're less likely to be disappointed. You're more likely to understand, okay, well, this is good. I'm happy with the results. It may not be perfect. It may not be what they're showing me in the brochure, but it looks natural. I have more hair. I'm able to live my life and feel more comfortable in my own skin. And you also will be aware of the fact that you may need another surgery down the line. It's like, look, when a woman gets breast augmentation, usually those breasts are not going to last a lifetime. They've got to be rotated out. That's part of going under the knife and making that commitment. And, in a sense, the same thing goes with hair. Hair loss is a progressive disease. It's a progressive condition. And most guys will need more than one surgery. Even though you're 44 years old, if you choose not to take medication, you're almost guaranteed you're going to need another procedure.
Yeah.
If you don't do well on medication, you're guaranteed you're going to need another procedure. It's unlikely that you're just going to stop progressing. Let's put it that way, on your own.
The other thing that's real important to remember, too, is this is surgery, and no matter what anybody tells you, there is scarring involved, whether it's very minute and you can hardly see it, or that, there is scarring. So it's like
I look at Spencer and a guy who's gone through 20. I'm not sitting in front of him, but I wouldn't even thought that he had any surgery.
Well, Spencer didn't have any surgery, but Joe had 9 surgeries.
Joe?
Yeah.
Joe,
so I don't know which one is Joe.
Person.
Yeah.
Joe, is Joe the one with the blue shirt or the dark shirt?
The darker shirt.
One.
Yeah, he's the handsome one. Yeah.
No, Joe looks good in person.
Yeah.
Okay, well, neither one. I wouldn't thought. I wouldn't. I mean, I guess the scars, are they really obvious, or? I mean, okay. I mean, it's something.
Well, I mean, Joe's scars would be very obvious if he shaved his head. Now,
if I shaved my head, yeah.
He happens to have some really good scars, but he had strip and FUE done. Initially, his scarring wasn't that great, and he was numb for years.
You remembered? Yeah, that's true. The back of my scalp was numb for 9 years before I had my first repair surgery. I had 2 scars in the back of my head, not just one. I had 2 scars. They were stretched. The back was numb. And the first surgery consolidated both strip scars into one. And I've only had 1 strip scar ever since. Every surgery has been a return to that same area to take out the previous scar and replace it with a brand new one every time.
Okay. And by going to FUE, can I avoid? I can imagine it's really painful as well. Will FUE avoid? I mean, this degree of scarring. I mean, I understand. I'm not getting around the scarring. Will it get around the degree of scarring that you've had to endure? Or
well,
I assume all the pain that's associated with it as well.
Technically, FUE will leave you with more scarring if you were to combine all the scar tissue into one. Like the cumulative scar tissue is more with FUE than if you have a strip surgery. Simply because, just for quick math, if you're doing, say, 2,000 FUE extractions with a 1 millimeter punch, that's 20 square centimeters of scar tissue that forms. Whereas with a strip, if you have, say, 20 centimeters long and 1 centimeter wide taken out, if you have, say, a 2 millimeter wide donor scar, then that's 4 square centimeters versus 20. So the difference in scar tissue is pretty big. It's just with FUE, it's spread out over a much larger area. There's not a pattern that the eye is drawn to. The eyes are drawn to patterns, and so that's why you can see the linear scar more so than FUE scarring, even though it's a lot less scarring overall. If that makes sense.
It does make a lot of sense. What about in terms of pain? I mean, I assume that there's a lot of pain that was associated. I mean, if your head was numb for 9 years, then it was no pain. Oh, okay.
No, there's pain because it's surgery. You have needles that numb and freeze the area. You have soreness after the fact, but you'll also have soreness after an FUE procedure. And the difference with strip and FUE is that with a strip surgery, you have reduction of your mobility after the procedure because the back of your scalp is going to be tight, so you can't go do squats and deadlifts 3 days after surgery. You gotta wait several weeks or even a few months, depending on the surgeon and their recommendations. Dr. Alexander probably has different recommendations than the next guy, but I'm sure they're valid based on his experience on how long it takes for you to get back into an active schedule.
Mine is 1 week.
For FUE, and then what about for strip?
No, for strip.
1 week after strip to go start doing deadlifts and squats?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean,
see, yeah.
I put some deep stitches in.
Okay.
It kind of takes that problem of falling apart away.
Yeah,
but
and that's awesome.
Where's your office located?
In Arizona.
Oh, I was just in Arizona. Okay. Sorry, I travel a lot for work. So. Okay.
All right, well, listen.
It's just how you do things. You have to, every step along the way, you have to make sure you're doing the best possible work that you can do. And then you won't run into those problems. But it's like they've all said, if you're African American, you got to be willing to deal with the possibility of keloids. It's just, it's what it is, So if you don't think you have a problem with that, then there's a chance you'll be okay. But you can't guarantee it.
Yeah, I'm 44. I mean, I've been cut, scarred. I don't have any keloids. I'm not worried about that. So maybe I'm fortunate. I respect,
Yeah, you're lucky.
Well, here's the thing, and I have another question. Since you are African American, since you are dark skinned, did you ever try to cut your hair really short or shave your head? Do you know what that looks like?
Mohawks and I'm sitting here wanting to I don't want to put limitations on my hair. I mean, I want to be able to grow it out, wear a mohawk, and do all types of other stuff. I mean,
right, but let me ask you. Let me ask you a question. Can you shave? Have you shaved your head completely, and how do you look? How do you feel? Do you feel comfortable like that?
The last time I shaved my head when I was 20, and no, I didn't like the way it looked. And
okay,
because I've not explored it.
You're going to be putting the greatest limitations on yourself if you do decide to have surgery. Because once you are cut, that is it, my man. You're done. You are cut. You can never shave your head again.
Yep.
So understand.
Oh, you're talking about if I do the FUT, you mean? If I do FUE?
No, so even if you do FUE, you can't shave your head to the bone.
Even if you have an FUE, you want to leave a little bit of hair there.
Oh.
You don't want to shave it because you will see the bumps.
So you are, you said something interesting. And again, the members of my organization pay a monthly screening fee or an annual screening fee. It is not in my best interest to talk people out of surgery. However, that's what the show is about. We're here to give you the truth. And we want consumers and potential hair transplant patients to really understand what they're getting involved in. And if they're not prepared for all of these things that could happen, and all of these limitations and just, the variables that are involved in hair transplant surgery, then they don't make good candidates and they should not have surgery. So you have to be prepared. You said you don't want to have any limitations with your hair. If you have a hair transplant, you're limiting yourself to maintaining a head of hair for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
So whether I like that hair looks or not, yeah.
Whether you like it or not. So, don't mean to bring. I don't mean to bring the room down, dude. But I'm just trying to be honest with you.
This is the reason why I called in because, I don't have any experience with this. It's interesting. When I went into the doctor today, he asked me about my family history, and I had to tell him a story that from my father's second marriage. Right, my father had me when he was about my age, maybe a little bit. Yeah, he had me when he was about my age. So today, my father's 89. He's bald.
Okay. Yeah.
Now my brother from my father's first marriage went bald when he was in his 20s, like 23, 24. So, for most of my life, I've been kind of wondering, is it going to happen? When is it going to happen? And it hasn't happened. But now I'm starting to see this thing, and I'm like, is the end result look what like my father looks like? Or, maybe it's kind of passed me by. And, so some of the questions that you asked me, are interesting because there's not anything I really considered. I mean, for the most part, I functioned like, wow, okay, I didn't have to deal with this. But now I start to see my hair like really thinning, and I'm like, does this surgery a cure-all? No, it's not.
Well, first of all, consider yourself very lucky that you are just dealing with it now in your 40s. Most guys, or a lot of guys, really start a lot earlier in life, especially. Like I started at 21. Joe started probably a little earlier, around that same age, or high school years or whatever. And so, dealing with it at a young age is very difficult. Now, dealing with it at any age is difficult, but usually, and this isn't necessarily the case for everybody, the later you start the progression of hair loss, the less advanced it's going to be. Now, that's not always true. I've known some guys who started at 40, and then by the time they were 50, they were complete Norwoods. Like they were Norwood 6s, Norwood 7s, never coming back. However, in most cases, I would say that the later you start, the better chance you have of maintaining more hair. So you may end up only progressing to a Norwood 5 or a Norwood 4 or something like that, throughout your lifetime. And with that said, that makes you a better candidate for different procedures. It makes you a better candidate for hair transplant surgery in general. It makes you a better candidate if you ever want to wear a hair system, which it doesn't sound like you would want to do that.
What is a hair system?
Basically, it's a wig. It's fake hair. It's glued to your head.
Oh, okay.
You got to slap that on and, deal with that. But there's a lot of great systems out there that are relatively inexpensive. And if you're willing to do that, if you're married and you're not concerned about, someone discovering that you're having a hairpiece, it could look very natural. I mean, people would not be able to tell if you wear it well. But again, with your level of hair loss, I would say maybe talk to your doctor about starting medication. Transplants are always going to be there. You know, you could wait a year, 2 years, 3 years, and you could take this time to really do your research and then make the decision based on really feeling comfortable. Like, okay, I've done my due diligence. I'm ready to have this done, and I understand what the possible pitfalls are.
You guys have been extremely helpful. I will continue to listen to the show because obviously there's a lot to learn, and I don't really know where I get those resources from. So, but just reading the thread and listening to you guys, I appreciate it. I got to go. My wife is yelling at me.
Go ahead, man. Listen, whatever you do not jump into surgery. It's always going to be there.
Take your time.
Okay.
Okay, man. Good luck.
I appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you guys for everything.
Thanks for calling.
Guys. Bye.
Phone number is 888-659-3727. Dr. Alexander, I don't know if, I guess we're probably going to let you go. You probably have to go.
Yeah, I got to run.
You've been on the air for an hour and a half.
Thanks for hanging out with us.
Thanks for hanging out. We're going to take some more calls. But, I mean, before you leave, what is a message that you want to leave with our listeners? No pressure.
I think, it's just like you said, you got to do research. You got to get in there. You got to find someone you can believe to get the correct information, because there's a lot of questions you got to answer when you're thinking about this. You don't want to make a mistake, because as you all know, once you cross that bridge, you've crossed it.
Exactly. Well said.
That's it. And that's exactly what, you can see how this guy is now just starting to do his research and how difficult and confusing it can be. And this is
look where he's been already.
Yeah, of course.
He was lost.
Well, where do you think you're going to go? I mean, that's part of the fabric of our culture, whether it's Bosley or the Hair Club, or that's the way that it is. And then, I would say that luckily, I'm not saying that he would have had a bad procedure done at Bosley. Bosley's come a long way, but based on at least how he described the consultation, it seems like he would not be getting the appropriate density based on his explanation of his consultation.
Right.
Well, and the biggest problem I see with these patients that have those areas transplanted is if they're using big blades to make those sites, it becomes very scarred and lumpy bumpy. And then to go back in on a second time and try to make it good, you're placing grafts into scar tissue instead of nice, good, fresh tissue.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's a difference.
Well, none of this is explained to the consultant off the street or the patient who's coming in off the street. Every lead costs these companies money. And again, I'm the first one to say that there was a time when I was really, gung-ho, anti-Chain Clinic, anti-Bosley, but Bosley has come a long way. And we receive far fewer complaints than we ever have from Bosley. However, it really depends on the clinic. It depends on the consultant. It depends on the doctor that you meet with. There's so many variables within these chains. And that's why you really just can't go for a name. You have to know who these doctors are, know who's performing the surgery on you, meet with patients who actually had surgery by that physician and the technicians who are going to be performing surgery on you.
Yeah, that's a good set of advice.
Yeah. Well, that's what we're here for. Doc, listen, thanks so much for calling in. Dr. Scott Alexander, you can find out more about Dr. Alexander by going to iahrs.org and check out his profile on the International Alliance of Hair Restoration Surgeons. And Dr. Alexander, why don't you give out your website?
Go to biltmoresurgical.com or drscottalexander.com.
Okay. Yeah, check him out. I mean, Dr. Alexander does some really, really pristine work. And he's one of the guys who, thankfully, is still offering strip and has the infrastructure to offer strip, because no matter what you guys are hearing out there, strip is still a vital component and a really important option for a lot of patients, in my view. And I think that sadly it's going by way of the dodo.
And I have a strict protocol to where strip is the only option, where I will not do FUE.
Yeah.
So you have to use it you have to use each procedure for the right set of circumstances.
Well, and that's unfortunately something that's not being put out there through the mainstream media, the marketing that we see online and in in-flight magazines, and through the mainstream cosmetic surgery sites and places like Real Self, in my view, are not really offering the consumer all of the information that they need. And again, this is my opinion, to make an educated decision. And sadly, what is considered state of the art today, shit's been around forever.
Yeah.
It's been around for more than a decade. So, all right, Doc, listen, thanks a lot. We'll talk
Good
soon.
to talk to you.
All right, take care.
Thanks for calling, Doc.
Bye-bye. Hey, guys, the phone number is 888-659-3727. Let's see who this is. Hey, you're on the air. Who's this and where are you calling from?
Hey, guys, it's Mo from Jersey. How you guys doing?
Mo from Jersey. What's happening,
up, Mo?
man?
Hey, Mo, pleasure. How you guys been?
We're okay, man.
We're good, buddy. How about you?
I've been keeping up with the show. I missed the last 2 episodes. I can't lie and say I haven't. But I've been keeping up with the podcast and and watching it on YouTube after that. But great show as always. But
thanks, man.
I just wanted to, I think it was not your last episode, but the episode before that. I mean, it just had me just shit scared about. You're talking about, I think, where you had the patient who shared his story online with. I mean, I don't want to name the doctor, because he is an IHRS member, and I don't want to kind of, put one bad result, because as you know, all doctors have some, results that are where patients aren't fully pleased.
Sure.
But it just, I read his story also on a networking site.
Yeah.
It kind of goes back. I remember where Joe was. He did a video where he was talking about, Paul McCartney and basically where he was, who I'm talking about, Joe, and about that spray where it prevents from all that, all the fluid, all the, what do you call it? I'm just totally blanked out. Where if you apply this spray during surgery or post-surgery, something like that, where your face isn't really, bloated up and it's not.
Yeah. About, what the hell was that? Talking about tumescence and pumping up the scalp and using, God, what the hell was that? I forgot. I know the video.
Sodium, not sodium. What is it called? No, I can't think of it either.
Saline, something saline?
No.
Sodium bicarbonate.
Sodium bicarbonate. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sodium bicarbonate. Right.
Yeah.
And it's just ever since that. I mean, listen, I don't know if it's the doc, but in his defense, not really in his defense, but in his one thing that really could be, as a doctor, I mean, you're responsible, but you don't necessarily always know what's going on in the management of things. I'm actually in academia, right? So in academia, just to, a quick rundown is that many of the times, when you have like deans or like department chairs or things like that, none of them will actually want to be in that position, because these are people who are purely interested in research, purely interested in teaching, large number of classes, tenured faculty, and basically they have a person who's there just to manage, who would be like an assistant dean, whose job is just to manage. But it's like a state or sometimes, a university policy that you need somebody in the discipline. So they're almost always forced to take on the job, and they never want to take it on. This kind of reminds me like that, where, it's like a lot of the times these doctors don't really, they could be well-meaning doctors. And in this case, I mean, I really don't know. I'm not going to say no or yes. I don't want to comment on that. But it's just their whole marketing team is doing things on their behalf, and they may not even always be aware of it. And it's really important for them to kind of be on top of their game. And ever since that person, I mean, you guys have been mentioning about since, he joined in. And, that was Nazareth's, he was part of Nazareth's, a marketing team.
Yes, he was. Yeah.
And yes, he was. Yes.
He actually contacted us about Nazareth. I think it was in 2008. And at the time, Nazareth did not have 500 cases under his belt, so we couldn't even take a look, really look at the application. And
so for membership, you mean?
Yeah. So I couldn't take Nazareth's money, and this is before Nazareth became Nazareth. So, yeah. So what I found interesting about this guy who used to work for Nazareth is that he had mentioned some things kind of on the phone and during consultations about organizations or my organization or, what we did and also about some online stuff. And it was very questionable. I didn't understand why, because the doctor he's working for now is part of what we do. So the whole thing was just a real bizarre turnoff, and I don't know if you saw that video where basically Nazareth and what'd you call the other guy?
Paul McCartney.
Paul McCartney. Paul McCartney were talking about the message forums and how
not even close to Paul McCartney. I will say that
about the message forums.
Hey, he's in his defense, he's a talented kid though.
Oh, he's he's very talented.
Yeah, he's a talented dude. Not really my thing, but
no, the guy could sing and he could play. He's definitely good at what he does.
Definitely.
But I just found it really fascinating because the way they were talking was that physicians come on these message forums and they're sponsors and as though the entire thing is a scam, when that's really out there for public consumption. And what I found most fascinating is that his doctor is part of this.
Right.
Joe, you laughing at that?
I'm sorry. Dav H10 says, never take hair advice from someone that wears a helmet and plays a Filipino ukulele.
Yeah, I mean,
oh God.
Listen.
Oh. Yeah, that was good.
That video, I mean, it's just, man, I personally speaking, I wasn't a huge fan of his results. And again, I do think he has natural results. So I mean, in that case, I can't knock the doctor generally, but I felt like it was. I just felt like he was lacking a little bit in the density part. And obviously, you guys know me. I'm not really, I'm really realistic with expectations, but as compared to other peers. But I mean, generally speaking, I can't hate. Obviously, the doctor has some skill to him, but I just wasn't like a huge fan of his work. That's just me personally.
Well, but, and here's the thing about the IHRS, and I think it's important, and I tell this to everybody. People have asked, are all the doctors equal on the IHRS? The answer is no. What we try to do is provide people with access to doctors who have the most consistent results and who meet a very specific criteria, which are very few. That's the thing. Now, this particular doctor met that criteria, and for years the results, I mean, we got 0 complaints. I believe that something has transpired either in this particular physician's life or within the practice infrastructure that has changed things. And now that I have the opportunity, I'm going to be, like I said last week, speaking with this guy. He hasn't been around, so hopefully I'll be speaking with him this week. I kind of want to get to the bottom of what has happened, not only to the patient who came on the program, but there's a couple of other things that I'm concerned about, including Paul McCartney's result. So,
right.
Listen, shit happens, man. I mean, who knows what goes on in people's lives? Like you said, there's a lot of guys that don't even know what's going on as far as what's going on in their marketing, what's going on as far as the consultation and how things are being sold, either overpromised, and how guys may be misled. That's the sad nature of the game. And you know what? But with what you said, and I believe this, I believe that the physician is the captain of the ship. And in the end, it's his responsibility.
Of course. I will say this. I from hearing the patient call in and also reading about it, I do like the fact that he did stay behind, his patient at the end of the day, where he, offered him a refund or I think a free transplant. And I mean, at the end of the day, for all those guys, I mean, that's the only thing we can wish for is that. I mean, we're always taking a chance, right? Every time we're
we're always taking a chance. But let me just throw something your way. What else is he going to do? Right? Because you're dealing. Every doctor does this. I mean, for a doctor not to offer some sort of assistance or a partial refund, especially if they're in the public eye on any level, it's actually rare. I've seen clinics do it.
I'm sorry.
I've seen clinics say, go get stuffed, and sometimes, it's even worse than that. But most clinics, unless they're kind of behind the shadows and they don't engage online in any way, most clinics are going to do something to appease the patient on some level. So I get it, I understand, and it makes sense, and I do agree. It's great that there was, that he stepped up to support the patient, but realistically, it's not something that any other IAHRS member wouldn't do.
I totally agree with that. I think the IHRS. I mean, I definitely agree with that. I do think, there would be no other IHRS that would have done things, maybe even went even more above and beyond. But there is. I mean, and again, obviously, you guys know this much more than I do, but I've just come across so many horror stories of otherwise great physicians. I mean, there's a physician, again, I'm not taking any names you probably know who I'm talking about, who I think he's based in the Bay Area. He has what seem to be great results. I mean, otherwise, like you, I'm also kind of bothered of the way he makes his videos. I mean, it just kind of rubs me the wrong way. But I mean, I can't hate, on this physician, but there was a big story with him, with one of his patients, and not just one, a few patients. And this is where I do think a little bit of real self is important, because it's not important on the physician's end to judge their work, but where at least patients can share their experiences. And too many times on that website, and honestly speaking, real self is like the last thing I look at, but there were too many times where I've seen this particular physician really say, so this patient had bad results, like some patients can have, right? And basically, long story short, all right, cough up another $5,000 and we'll fix it, we're not going to give you a refund. And this is a guy, this is a physician who's up and coming and who's, in the public eye in terms of being online, marketing, and does have great results otherwise. And so it's just maybe, because I do see too many, instances where, there are some, places that just go, I mean, Nazareth sometimes. I mean, Nazareth and to piggyback off the other thing you were saying, Spence, about what's changed. Again, I've had contact with his office, with Nazareth's office before, he received his oracle from God, right, before he became Nazareth.
Right.
And I was pretty, not close, but I had a pretty professional relationship with the office, because like I told you, I was considering them. There was a thing where basically he fired everybody, right? He had his whole breakdown, whatever. And basically what happened was that the marketing team, and it was a totally messy situation, because some of his team accused him of some real nasty stuff. And those are just accusations. They have no proof, so I'm not even going to mention them, right? And his whole office totally collapsed. He was facing a lawsuit for some federal, offenses, and basically his thing was obviously, as you guys know, revoked. So what happened, from what I understand, of how some of these people got to where they need to be, is that they totally spread out, and and I know one person who went back, and they kind of redeveloped and are back to doing, their stuff, which good for them. But their team is really spread out to multiple different offices. I mean, Dr. Roz, right? We were talking about that. One of the people is, at Nazareth's office.
I love these code names. It's like we can't mention the doctor's name for some reason. We got Paul McCartney. We got Jesus of Nazareth.
Right.
And just too funny.
No, we have somebody else, right? Paul McCartney, Nazareth. We have something else, but anyway.
The one you just mentioned south of Nazareth.
Dr. Oz.
Dr. Oz.
Dr. Oz, right. No, that was you guys. I got that from you guys.
Yeah.
And then the one in San Francisco, you didn't name him.
I think you got Nazareth from us as well. I could be wrong.
Nazareth, I think I did get. Yeah, I think I'm swaggy jacking. I totally think that.
Well, we were talking about the Nazareth thing, and then you adopted it as a regular reference.
I did. Hey, I'll take it though. But long story short, not to ramble on, but that team really spread out, and I'll say this: there were a lot of offices I know for a fact that wanted some of these people in his office, their marketing team, because they thought what this guy was doing I mean, Joe, you mentioned in last time we spoke, is that he was one of the first people, or if not one of the first, but he was a big person online where he would be one of the first people you'd hear of. He really picked up the online thing where a lot of good doctors weren't.
Oh, he killed it, man.
Who, Nazareth?
Bro. And
yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, no question about it.
And people really went for those people, and some of his marketing team spread. I mean, Dr. Oz, half of it, I think he's working for both. I think he's working for Nazareth and that. Maybe if that's not, I know he was doing that once, but he probably isn't anymore.
Well, you missed out on the last show. Not the last show because we did a Friday show, but I think it was the last week. We had a caller talking about his experience with Dr. Oz, and he spoke to someone in the office, or he spoke to Dr. Oz about some financial stuff, and he said, "You need to talk to the owner of the clinic or the owner of the company." So
get the hell out of here.
So I got the impression from that Dr. Oz isn't, kind of controlling the strings of his own own clinic.
It's not his practice, apparently.
That's not his practice. It's someone else.
And again, we don't know that, but that's what it appears. That's how it appears after the conversation. Yeah.
Well, I do know this. Do you know Dr. Oz has 3 other physicians that are now? It's him. There's a female doctor, and there's his brother. So it's like 3 or 4.
And by the way, for those who are just tuning in, we're not actually talking about Dr. Oz. So
I was just going to say that.
If Dr. Oz's people are like, what the fuck are they talking about? Dr. Oz does not do hair transplants. You are correct. We are just using his name as a reference for someone who's on his show.
Maybe we should refer to him as the hair model.
Honestly, maybe we should stop using that name because we can be some serious shit.
No, not really.
Or hair Bretts. How's that?
No, I would just say I would say the physician who is once on Dr. Oz. That's it. Yeah. Something like that.
It's like he who must not be named.
That's right.
Harry Potter. But I mean, it's so I do know he has like 3 or 4 physicians, but I always had the impression that he was like the lead, the lead person. He trained under Nazareth. I'm pretty sure you guys know.
Yeah.
And he uses the same technique. And this is the thing about some of these marketers, man. They can make a pile of shit look like a pile of gold.
Well,
I've seen his results,
especially for guys who are so vulnerable and are looking for that pile of gold. They're not looking for the pile of shit. They're looking for that pile of gold. So they'll even if the pile of shit is sitting in front of them, they're not going to know to look for that shit. They're looking past the shit and seeing the gold.
I've seen some of his results, right? And they're just these big, large, pluggy graphs. And I would normally a good physician would hide away from these results and share it. And no, they have like a full 15, 20-minute video and like, before and after and things like that. But it reminds me of what Joe said a while back. It's, where somebody, I think in Germany was saying, we don't care about naturalness, we care about density. It's something like that.
Yeah.
I guess people get so desperate that they just want to see a few strings coming out of their head. They don't even care about how it necessarily looks.
Well, how do you think the old timers continue to, and they're still in the field? How do you think the guys who are doing 4mm plugs, the mini and micros, they're still fucking hanging on? You see these guys at these conferences who are like, they're hustling hair. They're like 75 years old. They're still hustling hair. And do you know how many walking wounded, how many fucking casualties they left behind over the years? They're still in business.
Yeah. I used to say early in my career, like in the early 2000s, and a patient would mention one of these old timers, and I'd say, look, if they were doing plugs, I know what it was. They'd say, well, Dr. So-and-so says he's been doing this for 20 years. Great. So he used to give guys plugs in their hairline. What do you think of that?
Right.
And they'd be like, wow, I never thought of that. It's like, that's nothing to really brag about. I used to put plugs in people's heads.
Oh, yeah. I've been performing surgery since 1975. That's not a good sign in my view.
That's not a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. No, I mean, very much so. But it just scares the hell out of me that I think doctors are getting too caught up in the marketing. It's funny because the last show I spoke to you guys, I was saying how a lot of great doctors aren't marketing properly. And now I'm really going back and saying, they're maybe marketing a little too much and not focusing on that. I mean, and Paul McCartney, or Filipino Paul McCartney, I'll say, even that whole partnership, it is a little, when he was making that whole video of saying, I'm like, dude, you're representing basically, he says he doesn't, but you really are representing this doctor.
Well, here's the thing. I don't have much to say about him because he's just a dude trying to make a living. He doesn't fully comprehend. I believe it's the physician's fault. That's what's sketch about it in my view. If it's just some guy off the street, some musician who's like, wait a second, I have this opportunity. I get this free hair transplant. I have a big following. I'm going to market this guy. Listen, is it really his responsibility to protect consumers? Well, you know what? I think there's a moral responsibility, but fuck it. He's just a guy trying to make a living. I can't even blame him. The way that I look at it is physicians who get involved with people like that's sketchy. But also physicians are they are basically told that this is what needs to be done in today's environment. This is what's going to get you eyeballs. This is what's going to get you leads. And even if it is a little bit, I don't know, even if a little misinformation is being provided, the consultant or the advisor will say, that's not your fault, doc. It's really on the person who's putting out the content. So there's a lot of, I got to blame the doctors, I got to blame the consultants, and I can't blame Filipino Paul McCartney. I think he's just doing whatever he can.
I think the blame can be spread around to all of them. Because I completely agree with Spencer's position on the guys just trying to make a living. But in this industry, you can't, I believe that you can't just try to make a living unless you're going to do it ethically. And,
but that's our position. That's how we decided to do it. Most guys in this industry don't, and especially guys who are newcomers, they don't understand. They really don't understand what could happen to people. Now, what's interesting to me is that this guy had a procedure or a couple of procedures that he wasn't fully happy with. So he knows that things may not be perfect and can go wrong. And he may have had some anxiety. He may have suffered a little bit until he got repaired or whatever. So, look, I can't speak to other people's morality or why they do what they do. All I can speak to is, in my view, it's the responsibility of the physician in the clinic. And
the association,
these people should know better.
The association does speak volumes as far as I'm concerned. It's like you can't not know especially someone that's or some sort of marketing effort that's in everyone's face. You can't not know about it.
And by the way, let me just address Jay Spearin 4049. You're not going to hear a busy signal on this phone for some reason. I have not been able to fix that. So it may seem like you're getting through and then it drops off. That means that all the lines are lit. So just keep calling. Right now, all of our lines are lit. As soon as I drop one caller, you'll probably get through. Go ahead. Sorry.
There you go. You saw that.
Yeah. So listen, dude. You are completely right. And in your assessments and everyone's assessment, look, I make this clear, and I speak to doctors all the time. I speak to doctors who are like, they're upset that we're telling the truth about what's happening in the industry. And there's also those who support what we do and understand, like Scott Alexander, that he told that patient that he treats patients like him all the time. My first instinct is to tell the guy to wait.
Yeah.
That's just the way that I operate. But Dr. Alexander supports that message. He understands that if he's on this program, if he's in the IHRS, there's a good chance that Kobren and Tillman are going to talk people out of having surgery. And when they decide to have surgery, they're going to be prepared.
Right.
They'll be better informed. They'll be better prepared emotionally, intellectually, the whole nine yards. And they ultimately make better patients. Even if it doesn't, that's the thing. Even if it doesn't work out 100%, there'll be a lot more understanding of it after doing research for a year than if they had a procedure 2 weeks after they started looking. Excuse me.
Absolutely. Don't choke, dude. So
before I hang up, I have a quick question, Joe.
Yeah.
Did he did Paul McCartney ever? You remember he said when you guys were having your little online MMA fight? Did he ever really call up Hassan Wong and apologize and make do that thing that
I have no idea. I have no idea.
Because remember that was like part of the thing, right? He said he would apologize and things like that and all this. Because I never heard back after that. and I was.
I don't know. I mean, he made some sort of video after the fact where he's standing. It's like I actually made the guy get naked. Apparently, he's standing in his shower naked, talking about all these. Yeah, it's still up. I took the video down because it's like I delivered the message. I made my point. Clear is day.
He is in fair shape. I got to give him that.
Well, yeah, good for him. He didn't.
He went like totally shirtless.
He's in the shower.
He was holding his junk. He was covering his junk with his hands.
Actually, the thumbnail for the video, he's completely naked and covering his junk.
Which honestly isn't such a bad idea to get a little attention. Well, not that I think that it's something that should be out there on what we're doing. But listen, again, the guy is trying to market something.
But the point is that he made the video to specifically address the not accusations, but the proof I had of what he was saying, and he didn't address it. He addressed made up issues that I didn't even talk about, and it was going for like this victim type of approach where woe is me, I'm being attacked. It was kind of sad, but I took mine down because message was delivered, good enough, right?
Right.
But as far as him calling, I have no idea. I think he said
guys,
he did. I don't know.
Listen, we're going to take some more phone calls, man. But I always love when you call in.
Great show as always, guys. I'm going to hang up and I'm going to listen to the rest of the show.
All right, listen. Thanks for the call, man. Take care.
I will, guys.
All right.
Take it easy. Bye.
Phone number is 888-659-3727. What's the UK line, Joe? Did you put that in the description?
I did. It is 0203-3724-683.
Okay, so that's how it works. Line drops, then all the lines light up again. Let's make sure that this is the guy who's been on hold the longest. Hey, you're on the air. Who's this and where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Dave from Brooklyn, New York. What's going on, gentlemen?
Dave from Brooklyn.
Hello,
welcome.
Dave.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure, gentlemen. My superpower is my ability to listen. So thank you for enriching me.
So what's happening here?
It works.
Well, first I hate to get down in the mud with Mr. Dave DiMuzio. I really hate to do it, but I just have to throw this one thing in. Please forgive me. In one comment, someone described Joe as seeming to be a person of unscrupulous means, and I thought, don't you have that backwards, dude? Joe seems like an honest guy. I mean,
look,
like
dude,
a very honest guy.
This is the way that it is. There's been so much shit written about me online. There are guys who have tried to promote their products on our website, all kinds of bullshit snake oils who have made all kinds of shit up about me online. And that's the nature of the game. That's, once you put yourself out there, anyone who feels threatened is going to, put out some nonsense about you. Here's the key that you have to remember when you're dealing with online defamation or you're dealing with opinions and you're dealing with haters. Unless anything like that is written about Joe, unless that's verifiable, unless there's a lawsuit, unless he was convicted of something, and this is all public record, then it's all bullshit.
Yeah.
I tell people all the time, you see people writing about doctors saying that they've been investigated by the state medical board and stuff like that, when I know for a fact that these doctors were never investigated. This is usually either their competition or someone who feels they were fucked up by the doctor or whatever it is. And there's so many people out there who take what's written on the internet as the gospel. Now, obviously you didn't, but there are people out there who will.
And the thing is like when people make comments about anyone, doesn't me or anyone else in any other industry on any other platform, if they're saying something negative, if they're not showing proof of what they're talking about, then you absolutely owe it to yourself to dismiss it because it is simply a troll, a hater, someone that's got some sort of reason to say this, but if they can't present the proof behind it, then it's just more words on a screen. And when I have people say things like that, and thank you for bringing that to my attention, I don't care because I know what I'm doing, and I know that the information that I'm presenting on my web properties with Spencer on the show and what Spencer is presenting, this comes from knowledge and experience and a desire to pass that information on. I'm not selling lasers. I'm not selling, hair products.
Not yet.
Not yet. There's nothing wrong with that. right? But if I do ever go down that route, and I may, it'll be all over the video. It'll be clearly displayed saying, you click this link, I'm getting a commission. I'm making money on this, but I'm only making money on this because I believe in the product, right? So that's how I operate now. That's how I plan to operate in the future, and I know Spencer's the same way. So comments like that.
Hey, next week I'm wearing the helmet on the show for $10,000.
Naked.
Just shirtless.
Well, you still got to show your bald spot.
Here's the thing: people don't even know if I have legs. I could wheel out of this thing, God forbid. No one's ever seen me stand up. So,
well, gentlemen, in addition to everything Joe just said, in addition to everything you just said, there's also something called it's got how do I put it? It's got the truth has a certain ring to it, and when you hear people speak, when some guy sounds more like a used car salesman or more like a mensch, as Jewish people would say.
Yes.
So that's. I was telling my girlfriend, I was like, I love these two guys. I wish they lived in Brooklyn. I'd hang out with these guys all the time.
Well,
but
very kind.
Gentlemen,
I used to. So
if I may, if I may add one more thing, gentlemen, before I run. I have a friend who just had an FUE done. I had it done a couple of years ago, and I was so excited. I couldn't wait to see it, to examine it, and actually, he shaves his head now. It's a bit of a bizarre story, but it's not. I don't know if basically his friend. His friend got it for him as a birthday present, right? So there wasn't much research done on his part. And I know it sounds really, really strange. Anyway, he went through with a procedure. It's
like giving someone Lasix for a present.
Yeah. I guess so.
Jesus.
And he wasn't, I said, well, how many grafts you got back there? I had 101 questions.
He's like, I don't know. It was a gift.
I don't really know.
It's like when you're asking someone the cost of something. I have no idea it was a gift.
Right.
Well, I'll tell you, the first thing I do when I get a gift is I go online and look up the price. So that's just me.
Well, I'll tell you this, gentlemen. I couldn't wait to see, the implanted, the donor area as well as the implant, hairs. And I couldn't tell anything from the top because he shaved it. It looked super clean, maybe too clean. I don't know if they ever took. But I'll tell you, from the back at least, whatever this, amounts to at least, he had microscopic white dots, like they were so small. He's like Middle Eastern, so I'm pretty pale, so his skin is even darker than mine. So I suppose the white scars show more obviously on him. But man, were they next to invisible. I mean, I even touched them. They were smooth. They were not raised. They were not indented, because obviously we all know how they look right after surgery. And obviously, Joe, you're a veteran with this. So does that sound like, Joe, does that sound like something that one can realistically expect, or does that sound like an anomaly to you?
Honestly, I don't think you can expect anything. All you can do is hope. And I know it sounds negative, but that you don't know how you're going to heal. And you can give yourself some reasonable expectations by meeting patients like you did, your friend, and researching more about what they're doing in the procedure, like how big are the punches, the differences between skin types, and if they're experienced with your kind of situation. But ultimately, it comes down to the size of the punch, the angle that the punch is coming in, because the angle can actually dictate the size of the wound, which dictates the size of the scar. Okay, so your physiology, the size of the punch, and then the skill set of the hand that's using that punch. That's what determines scarring. So you got three factors there, and you're hoping that each one of them are an A+, and usually one of them will be maybe an A-, and sometimes a D-. You just don't know.
Right.
But also some of it has to do with obviously the size, and I don't know if you mentioned this because I wasn't listening to you, Joe, but some of this has to do with the size of the punch, obviously.
That's exactly what I just said.
Yeah. And there are a lot of guys out there who will promote the fact that they use smaller punches, and sometimes they're very successful with the smaller punches if you're the right candidate. But what a lot of guys aren't telling you is they may use smaller punches, create smaller punctate wounds, but they're not getting robust grafts. Did Joe say that?
Wow.
Did you say that, Joe? Okay, good.
No.
Because I wasn't listening, really. I was texting with somebody. But so, yeah, it's great that the guy has barely any scarring, but how did the grafts grow? I mean, the whole idea, and that's what I find fascinating about what's happening as far as the vernacular and the narrative of hair transplant, the narrative of hair transplant surgery now is everyone is hyper concerned about the donor, and they seem a lot less concerned about what the hair is going to look like.
Yeah. Right. Or even the donor hair is going to look like that remains in the donor area, because it may not be scarring, but the extraction pattern may be so poor that you see this demarcation. Almost like a brick was removed from the back.
And what
head.
about the peripheral damage that could be that's being caused, in the donor area as well? So where hair is being transected in the donor under the skin, then when the hair regrows, it's not growing as robustly or as well or at all in some cases. So there's just so many variables that no one really knows about.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, what you guys are doing, I think the best way to put it, I think, is, do you want to make a paint job, or do you want, a state-of-the-art paint job? And my perspective, my position is, listen, if money was not an object, whom would you go to? And then work your way down from there. You know what I mean? Because
you are speaking to someone who has a state-of-the-art paint job, my man. So that is me. But no, you're absolutely right. And, even if you choose to go with state of the art and you find the right guy, that's why, it's still so important that people know that it could still go wrong. So the first step is to make sure you're going to somebody who has really consistent results and you've done your research. And then you got to hope for the best.
And don't get a hair transplant with the idea, with the hope that you can shave your head, or with the goal of shaving your head, because that's not why you should get a hair transplant.
Which I'm doing right now. Yeah, because I'm a Norwood 6. I shave my head. I've got a beard, and I've got a date tonight, gentlemen. So thank you so much for everything you do, and please. Well, I'll get hit by a bus on the way out, so don't worry about that.
You'll be fine, man. I'll talk to you next week.
Thank you so much,
Take
gentlemen.
care. All right.
Have a great one.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Enjoy your date.
All right, let's take this call. He's been on hold for a while. Hey, man, you're on the air. Who's this and where are you calling from? Hey, man, what's happening?
Hey, this is Jace Burnham. Can you hear me?
Hey, man. Yeah, we can hear you.
Hey.
You made it, buddy.
Sure if it was me on the air.
So we are going to figure out what's happening. I still haven't really taken care of it, but hopefully by next week you guys will get an actual busy signal instead of the beep and the drop-off.
Yeah, that would be great, because I was like, this is weird. I've never encountered this before.
Yeah.
There's got to be something wrong.
Well, it's a bald show, too, so that's kind of weird.
We're on because of witchcraft, remember?
Yeah. So go ahead, man. What's up?
Exactly. Well, I just thought I'd update you. So last week, I was about to get a procedure with Cooley, and now I'm on the other side. Let me tell you, night and day experience from my first procedure. This guy is an absolute machine.
Yeah.
I mean, I was like, are you a robot? I mean, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Like we spent 25 minutes just talking about and me showing pictures of what I wanted and what was really important to me and what I wanted to prioritize.
That's all? Only 25? Just kidding.
And then, we did talk about it more, because then we went into his little studio where he personally took all the pictures of my hairline and looked at it, which was very different from my other procedure where the tech did that. She just took the pictures real quick. That was it. We were done. We moved on.
He uses that as part of the hairline design process.
Yeah, it was an incredible process. I mean, I can believe we spent over a half an hour him measuring my hairline, figuring out exactly what would fit my face best and what would.
I like the way he uses the mirror over your head, and he's standing behind you. Did he do that for you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's. I've never seen anyone else do that. I think it's pretty unique.
It is, and it was so different, and you could tell that he really cared. He really wanted it to be a good result. It was just such a big difference. And what ended up happening, so they didn't, normally Dr. Cooley's practice charges a little extra if you have a case that might be a little more complicated, which makes sense, because if you have scar tissue and a couple other issues that you guys have mentioned, it makes it a lot harder to get a good result. And the surgeon, if the surgeon really cares about the result, which this surgeon does, he's going to have to spend maybe another hour, 2 hours because of that. So because originally he didn't think mine was that bad, but when he went into the nitty-gritty and really looked at it, he ended up having to extract over, well, it's not extract per se, it's more, what is it called? Use electrolysis. He had to use electrolysis on over 200 grafts. That was a good, seemed like over an hour of the procedure. My entire frontal hairline, there was electrolysis done on. He just didn't like the grafts. He didn't like the placement. And I wanted a very high level, the highest level of density he could get. So he said my hairline was too low. He said it was only at 6 centimeters above my eyebrows.
Yeah.
And he said it should be at 7.
Just based on the images that I saw, I was pretty shocked. I spoke about that, I think, on the Friday show.
Yeah.
That we did. And that is a hairline design that I have never seen before coming out of that clinic. So I'm not sure what happened.
I didn't want to lower my hairline.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened. I'm like, I didn't even want to lower my hairline. I wanted it to stay the same. I don't know what happened. So yeah. And the other thing that I really emphasized last time, and I did it again this time, was that I really wanted density. Density was the most important thing to me over everything. And what I was told last time was that, I'm not going to be able to get maybe the highest density because if you try to place them too close together, you run into issues. What is it called when you run into
necrosis?
You make necrosis and then also
compression,
cobblestoning maybe a little bit.
Cobblestoning and compression, but probably more compression.
But I saw my results after the surgery with Cooley, and I looked at the fresh transplanted grafts, and they were twice as close together as my other transplant.
Yeah.
I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. This isn't what I was told.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, that's what the practice of medicine is. It's the practice of medicine. And what I mean by that is, everybody practices it slightly different. In some people's hands who have a certain level of experience, who are used to dense packing and are confident in the results of their dense packing, they're going to be able to dense pack. They're going to be able to do what Dr. Cooley did. In other practices, they may not have had as much success with dense packing. So in their hands or in their minds, they're like, this doesn't work. We don't want to risk it.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a sad nature of medicine in general. I mean, there are no absolutes. Not every procedure is done the exact same way. Everybody practices slightly different.
And not every patient can, if you do go to a doctor that knows how to do proper dense packing, not every patient is a candidate for dense packing due to their own physiology. Because
your skin can just fall apart.
Yeah, the tissue can fall apart if the incisions are made too close together. This is a great point that Dr. Bauman brought up when he was in studio. When some doctors will inject saline into the scalp to create tumescence. They'll inflate the scalp, which is a trick for dense packing. Sometimes the scalp can't inflate because it's too tight. So that can prevent dense packing as well if that's one of the tricks that the doctor uses. So, there are several issues that can get in the way of that. But generally speaking, across the board, some doctors are more experienced with it than others and have different approaches than others. So, there are those differences as well.
Yeah, and I saw there was a question. Yes, we did do FUT again. He really wanted to take the scar out. He didn't like the scar that I had.
Yeah.
So we did have to cut that out, and we did about 1,800 grafts.
So he got the scar and 1,800 grafts.
I got the scar out and 1,800 grafts. Yep.
Nice. Okay.
Mostly single and double. I only got about 180 triples. But he said that's what we wanted. That was a good thing since it's all frontal hairline work.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing he did was he took apparently 10% of the singles were really fine hairs. So he took those and put them in the front, which I think is extremely important. I think people always talk about single hair grafts. I think there should be two categories. I think there should be single and fine hair singles. And I really liked that he made sure to tell his tech to separate those. I haven't heard any other clinics or places discuss that.
Well, the thing about fine hair singles, I have mixed feelings on this because when like for instance, when you go to a consultation and you have a doctor pull out a scope and they're looking at your scalp, and sometimes they'll put it up on this monitor so that you can see, and they're showing you saying, see, this hair is this, and this is a clogged pore, and these are fine hairs. These are hairs we'll put in your hairline. They actually don't know if it's, a terminally fine, or if it's coming out of the telogen phase back into anagen, because a lot of times a new hair, as it's coming through back into anagen, perfectly healthy hair will be finer and then get thicker as it continues into the anagen phase. I think that there are some finer hairs in the scalp, so when they do separate them, I think that yes, a lot of those hairs will be finer hairs for the hairline, but I think some will also thicken into more terminal, thicker hairs, simply because they were potentially coming out of the telogen phase. So, he does this. Other doctors do this. I agree with the idea of it, but I don't agree that all the hairs that they pick out fine in a petri dish are going to be fine when they grow out. I think that some won't be quite so fine, but in general, it is a positive approach for sure.
Yeah, no, I mean, I 100% agree with that. There's no guarantee. Like there's nothing here is a guarantee.
Yeah.
And he did say, and I wanted to note this for everyone. He did say that if he was doing me originally from the start, he would have recommended FUE. He wouldn't have done an FUT. Yep. He would have done FUE.
Why did he say that?
Because he thinks he could have moved enough hairs with the FUE versus FUT. And because of the short, I wanted to go pretty short on the sides, so to avoid having to deal with the scar issue.
Well, you wanted FUE to begin with, right?
I did want it to begin with.
That's right. I remember. Yeah, you wanted that to begin with, and you're talked out of it. Yeah.
I was talked out of it because they're like, you want too many hairs. You have to do FUT if you want that many hairs. So, what our plan is now is hopefully, this scar heals really well, which it feels like it is. It feels better. Don't get me wrong, everyone that's listening, the first week, it's not fun. Not fun at all with FUT. And Joe, I'm sure you can comment on that.
Yeah.
I don't know how you did it 9 times, man. I don't know how you did it. I'm like a freaking hermit this whole week. Yeah. I think it's because we have smartphones now, and I'm so used to looking at my smartphone, and every time I look down, I'm like, oh, damn. Oh, shit.
Yeah, you feel that shit.
Can't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like, it makes it a good thing, I can work from home now, no problem, or run my own company. So I just use the laptop and, and my other monitor, I don't need to really look down too much. But yeah, I if I could go back, would definitely do an FUE, and Dr. Cooley even recommended it. Do you guys have any other questions for me? I just thought it would be cool to update everyone as I go through.
I'm glad that you did, and I think you can call as often as you want. I'd love to hear how things progress week by week, or if you want to call every couple of weeks if you have any questions as things are, as you're healing. Listen, Dr. Cooley is pretty easy to get in touch with. I think if you're a patient, and I'm sure that there's going to be some tremendous follow up, but sometimes it doesn't hurt if you need a little extra advice, or if you're feeling a little bit concerned about, what's going on with you, because every procedure is different. You may not come through it as, the same way that you did the first one. Now, obviously, the results weren't great for the first one, but your recovery may be completely different with this one. It really depends on your physiology.
Honestly, I'm hoping it's better. So far, it's like I said, night and day. Every single part has been better. I mean, I'm looking at the hairline now even, and I'm like, wow. Okay, that's a good hairline. I like that. This is going to be good.
Well, look, man, I'm really happy for you, and I'm glad that you were able to get your refund and you were able to, go and get this repair work. It sucks that you had to go through what you had to go through. I'm glad that now I have the opportunity to speak with your physician, which I will. I wanted to wait, like you said, until you gave me the okay.
Yep.
And we'll see what happens.
Yeah, one last thing. Is there any reason why with the last caller you want to use code names? Should I be using a code name in the future when I talk about doctors?
I'm sorry?
No, you don't need to use any. You don't need to use any code names.
I was noticed the code names. I was like, is it taboo to mention doctors' names?
No, it's not taboo. Listen, we have always wanted guys, even if people are part of the IHRS, to name names. let these guys know that they are, they are being watched as closely as possible. And, if people have a legitimate complaint, then fuck it. It's legitimate.
Yeah, because
why should that be hidden?
They're getting away with like highway robbery here, man. And it pisses me off. It just pisses me off.
Look, that's one thing about Bald Truth Talk. What we provide is we provide people with access to, what we consider to be really legitimate information. It's tightly moderated. And with that said, if you were to come on and complain about your doctor and we didn't know who you were, that complaint would have to be verified to make sure that it was a real complaint, that you were a real patient. And then we would contact the doctor. And then if everything was verified, then that complaint would go live and stay online in perpetuity. And that, to me, is really the only fair way for both physicians and for potential patients to see what's going on. Because sadly, what happens a lot on message forums, and what happened on our message forum years ago, is we found that a physician's competition would come out and try to destroy their reputation online. And that happened more than once. So, what we don't do is we don't want to hide the names. If someone has a bad result and they're a real patient, we want that complaint to be out there. We want people to be able to read that and understand, and maybe, the physician can come out and explain what may have gone wrong. And that's it.
Yeah.
What we don't allow is we don't let the peanut gallery come on. Guys who were not involved in the surgery, guys who were not there that day.
Anonymous
individuals. And make commentary.
Lobbing their opinions left and right.
And we also don't let anyone who actually works for the forum make any commentary either.
Yeah.
Forum moderators on our site are there just to moderate. That's their job. The only time you're going to see anybody write anything that's part of what we do is just to kind of guide you in the right direction and tell you to take a look at the terms of service or what may have gone wrong in the post or whatever. But commentary about a physician's work from a moderator is probably one of the most unprofessional things I've ever seen. And I think it really leads people in a dangerous direction.
Well, especially when a moderator is, when you have people that are in positions of authority giving their opinions, plus or negative, it's influencing the direction.
Well, imagine if I went onto my site. If I went onto my site and someone complained about one of the doctors, and then I went on and I had 10 fake people go on and say, "Oh, well, we've never heard of any complaints about this doctor. You must be, bullshitting us or whatever." Whatever goes on in these forums, it's unfortunate that it happens, and it causes a tremendous amount of confusion. People talk about transparency. There really isn't any transparency on most of the forums.
Yeah.
We provide a really transparent experience. And that experience is whatever's on there, if there's a complaint, it's a real complaint. So if that makes any sense, I just went off on a tangent, but Joe knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
it made sense to me.
Yeah.
It made sense.
All right, dude. Well, listen, don't worry about not naming names. You are free to name names.
All right. Appreciate you guys taking the call.
All right, man. Good luck.
Good to hear from you.
Later.
I just bored that guy to death. 888-659-3727.
He was busy responding to questions in the chat room while you were talking.
Actually, let's call it a night.
I need to run.
It's 7:18. Great show, guys. I want to thank everyone for taking the time to tune in. I want to thank Dr. Scott Alexander for taking the time to call in. It's always great to hear from a physician who is not only part of what we do, but also a fan of the show. And supports everything that we do out here, including our message that surgery is a last resort. That's hard to find. So that's why there's so few IHRS members. The website's hairtransplantmentor.com, which is Joe Tillman's personal website. You can read about Joe's journey from, balding normal guy to really fucked up hair transplant victim to recovering bald guy.
I wasn't even really a normal balding guy because it just started.
No, you were just a young guy who had a little bit of hair loss.
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
Just a wee bit.
Yeah, you made that mistake, like so many of these guys do. Joe's in the trenches. Check out his information on his site. It's a really well done, thorough website. And Joe, you are changing some of your policies as far as your ability to answer questions. What's going on? I know you want more people to call the show because you've just been getting overwhelmed.
Well, it would be nice for it's not an official policy change, but not yet anyway, but I am getting pretty much overwhelmed with a lot of emails, people asking me to talk, answer the questions about Propecia and lasers and PRP and all that good stuff. And it's really taking up a lot of my time. I need to be making videos for you guys. And I think that would be great if you got questions, you can come onto this channel, you can call the show, ask the questions on air, because there's 500 of the guys that are asking the exact same question at the exact same time. So that would be helpful to me, and it'd be a lot more educational for you and everyone else that wants to know.
All right, guys, the website, and I agree with that. So, yeah, if you have any questions, call the show. Don't bother Joe. The website's thebaldtruth.com for archives of this broadcast. Also, you could subscribe on iTunes. You can subscribe to Joe's channel, Hair Transplant Mentor YouTube channel. So if you subscribe, you have to also press the little bell, right, in order to get notified?
Yes. Yeah, you subscribe and then click the bell. That's what gets you the notifications when there's a new upload to a channel that you've subscribed to.
All right. If you're considering surgical hair restoration, check out the International Alliance of Hair Restoration Surgeons. We really believe that it is a safe place to start your research. Remember, even in the IHRS, not all these docs are created equal. Not every doctor is going to be the right match for every patient. You have to do your research. That's IAHRS.org, American Hair Loss Association, which we will be updating soon because that hasn't been updated since the Civil War, is AmericanHairLoss.org. Our message forum, baldtruthtalk.com. Until next time, be strong, God bless, and thank you so much for listening. Have a good night.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry for any inconvenience you may have been put to prior to the program, and I'm glad you enjoyed it. And if you could now leave by the exits at the rear, that'd be splendid. Thank you. Good night.